boy Montoya Smith, aka Black Socrates. All I ask is that you think.
What's up, everybody? It's your boy Montoya Smith, aka Black Socrates, and welcome to another episode of Just My 3 Cents, a live rapid fire broadcast. We in this thing 30 minutes. Try to keep it at 30 minutes, 35 minutes. And basically, as you saw in the intro, having hard conversations on race, sex, and culture with the ultimate goal of whatever we're discussing, trying to make it make sense, whatever you want to discuss, because this is a rapid fire live broadcast where the goal is that you jump on and join me as I, Montoya Smith, aka Black Socrates, philosophize about different issues of race, sex, and culture. You can call on and ask questions. Obviously, I promote a subject that we can start with, but whatever you want to jump on and talk with, make sure you hit the link. Matter of fact, while I'm thinking about it, let me make sure I put the link over on the live Facebook broadcast. So bear with me for 1 second it's already up on the YouTube. So if you're watching via YouTube, you should be able to join the broadcast with the link below and YouTube. I'm gonna make sure we're running on Facebook. Yes, we are. Let me put it in the comments. So give me a second. All right. So if you're watching via Facebook, you can absolutely hit that comment and join me for tonight's Just My 3 Cents rapid fire live broadcast on race, sex, and culture. But let's go ahead and get started with this. In a sense, this evening, we try to do this every Wednesday night, 8 p.m. So keep that in mind. Share it with your friends. If you're on YouTube, make sure you're liking and subscribing. I got to get better at saying that. But with that said, let's go ahead and get into this evening's topic. Excuse the light tonight. I'm not in my regular location, having to make this thing work. But I wanted to get into some of y'all may have seen the actual situation where the 20-year-old down in Florida has recently been charged with sex with one of her students. A substitute teacher in Florida was charged, and so I wanted to get into that dialogue as I saw a couple of things drop this week that absolutely made that very interesting. And as a friend of mine that I follow on Facebook, shout out to Eli Marcus, I reached out to him. Maybe he'll be able to jump on this evening, but he shared some interesting thoughts about that situation. And so what I see floating around quite often when it comes to a situation like that, where there's always these discussions, right, about, in a sense, men being predators to women, if you will. And then this situation, although it unfortunately happens a lot, like if you were to Google, like, for example, when I was looking up the information for the situation in Florida with that young lady, again, who's being charged with sex with the students on multiple occasions and misuse of authority, if you will. So those are a couple of the charges that she's being charged with. But when I just kind of looked it up in general, there's unfortunately lots of situations where teachers, unfortunately, are getting involved with students, if you will. And so, as I shouted out my man Eli Marcus again, I hope he gets a chance to jump on tonight. He's a new father, so shout out to that brother. He may not have time to jump on tonight, but I wanted to share some of his thoughts and kind of give you my 3 cents on some of the things that he shared, because there was a couple of things he shared that was eye-opening to me and that I had never thought about. And again, it's kind of normal to talk about men being predators to women, but flipping it around where, in a sense, the grown women, as young boys, for the most part, we're interested in beautiful women, even if they're much older than us. And so a lot of times we're not thought of in that manner. So let me share these thoughts from Eli very briefly, and then let's get deeper into it. Again, feel free to hit the link to jump on with me this evening. And so let's see here. Let me share these thoughts. So again, a perspective, some things that I want to share some things in here because I never thought about. And so he had shared this prior to even this coming out about the 20-year-old, if you will, in Florida. So it was just a thought that he was already sharing, kind of starting a dialogue about on his page. And so I was like, oh yeah, I want to pick up on that. And so what he said was this is what he wrote on his page. He said, interesting topic. My male barber, who was around 22 years old, told me he had sex with his female teacher in the 7th grade. And he said, man, that puss was good as hell. He didn't seem traumatized by the incident, but it was obviously wrong for that to occur. And Eli says, as I'm sure it had a negative impact on him in ways he may not comprehend. He says, teenagers do not have the cognitive maturity to make those kind of decisions with adults. Adults should leave minors alone as it relates to anything sexual. It's simple. So I've thought about that, and as a man, I've thought about this in the past because, again, it's always typically we talk about it the other way around, and I've always thought to myself, like, I think it's different. I think it's different for a man, and from the standpoint, again, even as a 16-year-old or 17-year, young man trying to holler, being that young man that would try to holler at a 20-year-old or a 21-year-old, and as I, in my own life, as I got older, I constantly had relationships with older women, if you will, but not necessarily at 15 or 16. But again, still, I didn't care about her age. I would make that attempt, right? And so I didn't see anything wrong with it, even though he says, hey, this is clearly wrong. Here's the additional thought that he gave me that made me really think about it. Because again, I didn't have a perspective as a male that there was anything wrong with it. And so that's the dialogue. This is the dialogue I really wanted to get into. And so what Mark goes on to say about this very topic. And again, this was eye-opening for me, and this is what I hope we can dialogue about. And y'all might want to jump on with me and dialogue about this as well. Hold on one second. Let me find it again. All right. So this is what he said. And again, this was eye-opening for me. That's why we do these dialogues, to get into the nuance. He says, I just had a thought. It's possible that many teenage boys aren't traumatized by their sexual experience with adult women. But I still find it problematic because it sets a standard and tone in the boy's mind that it's okay for adults to be sexual with minors, which begs the question, what happens when that boy becomes a man and has access to minors? That's where the danger manifests. The standard and tone implemented in his psyche as a teen having sex with an adult woman increases the likelihood of pedophilia. There needs to be more education on this and awareness of how it damages people. It's not just sex, as teenage boys or a disturbed man may think. It traumatizes and destroys. See, some of y'all that are listening may have already thought about that. I'm telling you that as a man, my man Eli up on this thing. Let me get him to jump on this thing with me. I don't know if you saw, I was just reading your words, brother.
I just heard it, man. I just heard it. Absolutely.
Yeah. That's what made me even want to dive into the topic, because I was just kind of mentioning before you jumped on that in your piece, well, not in your piece, but in your post, you said it's not just sex like many boys or traumatized men may think. I can tell you that as a grown man, I've thought about this topic, and I used to say, well, if it's boys versus girls, it's different. I never saw what could be wrong with it. And that's what made your post so dope to me, because you know enough about me to know that when I get exposed to a truth, my thought is, hold on, let me think about this, because I've never thought about it in this way. So I'll let you jump in, because you gave me a prompt of saying, because I actually responded on your post, right? I said, man, I never thought about this, but it could be the mindset, because after you talk, I'll tell you about some young men who started doing what you said. I never thought about it. It may have come from something like this.
Right. Absolutely. I definitely think that if a boy is exposed to sex too early, especially by an adult woman, he may have enjoyed that experience. He might not start acting weird and quiet and depressed after the fact. There may be no noticeable signs of trauma that he exudes in his behavior. However, there's a boundary that has been crossed. So in his mind, subconsciously, it's okay for an adult to have that type of relationship with a minor. And he carries that on in his adulthood. So, because at the end of the day, we're all human. So if he's carrying that kind of loose boundary in his adulthood, the moment he sees a minor and he thinks, "Oh, she look kind of good," instead of him correcting himself, instead of him centering himself, he is more likely to cross that boundary because it happened to him.
That's deep, brother, because I'll tell you, I grew up in South Carolina, Bible Belt, if you will, right? And I remember, and I don't know these young men's experience, right? But I remember when I started going to Atlanta, because that's the hangout spot. And you know what I mean? Now that I'm old enough to go myself and head down there or whatever. And I had some friends living there. And for a brief moment, I remember I went on one particular trip at that particular summer for whatever reason. I'm probably about 21 at the most, but I'm thinking I'm like 19 or 20 maybe, right? So I don't remember exactly how old I was, but in that summer when I went down to kind of hang out, you know, and catch the trends of the city, if you will, one of the things that they were doing, these young boys were doing, is they all had this young 15-year-old or 16-year-old. All of them had at least one. And here's how they were thinking of it. We're slutting her out. Like, and when I say thinking of it, I'm talking about to the degree of that with her, they could make her do anything sexually that they might not be able to get a woman their age. Like they was dating women our age. They were still having sex with women their age, but it was a whole process to get a woman their age to get comfortable with this young girl who they would wrap up. And, you know, I don't know if they were whining and dining, but I just remember going there and like, as a, you know, just based on where I was coming from, like nothing about this felt right for me. I was already kind of by that age. I didn't like younger girls that much. So it didn't make a lot of sense to me, but it didn't feel right either. Right. And I had a few friends from where I was from and they seemed to be rocking with it. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, y'all, where we from? We know this ain't cool, but in the city, it was the wave. And so I'm thought of it because of your post. Like it all came back because I never saw anything wrong with a young man because I was that young boy trying to get older women, and I quite often did. But I was 18 by the time I started getting older women. So I wasn't, you know, I didn't see the trauma we're talking about. But I was just wondering, I'm like, I wonder had some of those young men had this experience. I don't know, but it made me think about it.
What I will say is that particular post got over, I believe, 600 shares. So I went through all the shares and it confirmed it over and over again. Every single one, a lot of the posters were saying, yeah, you know what? Now that I think about it, every time a man has told me how he lost his virginity, it was always with an adult woman while he was a minor. So we know that this is a very common thing. I wouldn't be surprised if most men lost their virginity to a woman that was much older than him while he was a minor. So we know that this is a very common thing. So those men don't talk about it. They don't talk about it because they don't most of them don't identify it as something that was traumatic. Right. So they just keep it. They just don't talk about it. But what you don't talk about comes to the surface in another way. So when you see these older men messing around with minors, underage women, so that's under the age of 17 and younger. Where's that coming from? Where's that? Where in his psychology did he learn that that was appropriate and that that's okay? So I'm sure there's some sort of correlation between the two, between a boy being exposed to sex by an older woman too early and a man feeling like it's also okay to do that to a minor as well, to expose her to sex too early. There's some sort of correlation there. We might need to get a therapist online at some point. Right. But I'm willing to bet that there's a correlation between both of those.
Now, I really appreciate that thought so much, brother, because here I am, 48, and have never thought about it that way. I've literally always said, and I even understood that it's a little misogynistic, and I'll use that word from the standpoint of I thought for a girl it was no, but I still grew up with that as a boy. It's okay. So I had that up until you made me think about it, and I can agree. There's probably a correlation, like you said. It's time to open up that can of worms because when we start getting into these dialogues about what's predatory, like for example, like in today's time, because we try to make everything equal, I definitely hear people downplay older women messing with young boys. Like people say that now. They say it's predatory. But the issue is if us boys and men don't even realize it, like, for example, the verbiage used, and we're going to jump to the Ayanna Davis case, which is slightly different. And that's why I love nuance. I agree with you. I don't think it's the exact same scenario, right? But from what I understand, the young man that she may have messed with, and for anybody that's just watching right now, if you don't know, young lady in Florida, been charged. A substitute teacher was charged with having sex with a student on multiple occasions, and it got caught because of a TikTok video. That's all the details we need. It's not about her. But I'll say that even in that scenario, and I kind of lost my train of thought. Let's just talk about how it's different because I lost my train of thought. So let's talk about how that's a little different because I appreciated what you had to say because I see that as, I remember what I was going to say. I was saying that as young boys, because we don't see anything wrong with it, right? They wrote this word. The victim was 16 years or less. But this conversation is needed so much that it's hard for me as a man, before you ever gave me this thought, it was hard for me to see the young boy as a victim, because think about how it got exposed. It was the 16-year-old boy showing the video to his football friends, because that's a bragging point for a 16-year-old. I caught that little pretty 20-year-old substitute. Like, that's how the 16-year-old is treating it. Like, let's keep that a buck. But now we're saying, hold on, that's a problem. So it is something we got to figure out how to delve into.
Right. And, I think men and women tend to experience things or express their experiences in different ways. So when a minor woman or minor female experiences an older man violating her, you might hear that experience or see that experience on her. You might see the depression. You might see the issues, like visibly see it. Like, oh, wow, this had a negative impact on this person. A boy, he might be smiling and joking and stuff like that while he's 16, and he might genuinely feel happy. Like, yo, I've smashed a substitute teacher. Okay, what happens when he's 36 and 46, and he has to go drive past the high school or whatever, or he see a little girl walking down the sidewalk? Where's that boundary? Where's the psychological boundary in his mind on if he's going to approach that girl for sexual favors or not? So now, yeah, you smash a substitute teacher at 16, down to your 36, 46. Now that emotional memory revisits you. Oh, I can do this. This is actually okay. Whether you're conscious of it or not, I'm pretty sure it comes back to you. Well, it was done to me, so it's obviously a boundary that I can cross. So that's why I said we just need to talk about these things more, and try to talk about it in a way where we're not demonizing the person that committed the sin. They definitely deserve to be punished and all this stuff. But sometimes we get so caught up in demonizing them and that creep, they deserve to die. They need to be buried under the jail. That we lose time on unpacking what's going on in the mechanics of a person's mind that crosses that boundary. What happened?
And without doing what you're saying is how we learn and get better as a culture, because our hashtag for this show is raise the culture. So versus wasting time on the demonizing and they should do this and they should do that, if we do and unpack the way that you say, now we can have better dialogues about how we bring our children up in this culture, because our children are being raised in this culture. So simply demonizing doesn't give any tricks or discussions that can better help us raise our children in a social media age where they're overexposed to things. So that's why I think this matters. And I think this is a perfect segue to even talk about that young lady in Florida, because there is a difference. Had this boy been 17, now legally, and because he's a teacher, probably can't avoid the charges, if you will, right? That is what it is. But we could just simply demonize her and say, yeah, she's a predator. She gets what she should get. However, you saw it as a little different in the event that the boy had been 17, and I agree with your thoughts. Again, and this is a chance for people to see the difference in a dialogue of nuance, even though we're saying, hey, there's issues here. Let's continue to have a nuanced discussion. So talk about your difference. Let's say this boy had been 17, because that's the way you painted it in your response, particularly to that situation in Florida. If you can tell people how you see it a little different, because I agree with you on that.
Right. So in the original post, it said the boy, I believe, was either 17 or younger than 17 or something like that. The lady is 20. So that means there was probably a 3 or 4 year difference between the substitute teacher and the student. So that's not as bad as if she was 40 or 30. It's possible that this substitute teacher and student actually went to school together, both being students at one point. It's possible that they had a childhood friendship, a social connection. So with that situation, my point was, I'm not sure if school systems should hire substitutes at such a young age, simply because the social politics of it all is so complex that when a 19, 20-year-old substitute teacher walks into a high school, they may psychologically resonate more with the students than the administration. They may see the students as their peers more than they see these older teachers and the principals and the school board as their peers. And that may develop into a conflict of interest. Now, granted, she might have had other issues, self-esteem issues, may have been antisocial, Maybe she didn't fit in with young ladies and boys her age. And here's this football player. He might be 16, but that break, especially if she got bullied in high school or was maybe felt socially outcast during her high school years, this was her chance to finally have sex with the popular boy in school. There's no telling what issues were going on there. So she was so young that I do feel like the school system should consider increasing the age of substitute teachers, because we know that the brain doesn't finish developing until 25. The reasoning part of the brain,
right? Correct.
It doesn't finish developing until 25.
Exactly.
So if she was 25, 26, she may have analyzed that situation a lot differently if her brain was finished developed. She's still young-minded, probably still suffering from trauma from her school years, and all kind of other issues that she ended up getting herself in a situation that now she might have to register as a sex offender. I don't know.
Right.
So
see, so what I love about your dialogue is, again, if we don't simply demonize her, you offer the thought process of maybe as a culture we look at the age of substitute teacher. See that how that becomes the higher dialogue if we don't stop at she's a predator, she's sick, which is your point, right? Your point, and just being able to, like I say, have the actual dialogue. So go ahead, brother.
Intellectual honesty is so important, and that gets lost when we turn into the angry mob. Yeah. If I went to school with a girl that was a year younger than me, I turned 18, she's still 17. I graduate high school, the girl I dated maybe was 16, 17 years old. My attraction for that person that I went to school with it's not going to go away because I'm an adult now and she's legally still not an adult and she's only a year or two younger than me. So I don't think that, we have to be intellectually honest that if you're spending time with someone and they're a year or two younger than you, that attraction, that sexual attraction is still there. So I think we do have to take that into consideration, especially in the school system. So that would be my suggestion, is that the minimum age limit needs to be increased in the school system.
Yeah, I had when I posted that I was promoting this show, I was going to try to find the exact post, but I can remember most of it. And so I posted it, and literally I had somebody post that their mother and father have been married like 20, 25 years, maybe even 30 years, and they are the situation in Florida. They are the exact situation in Florida.
Wow, and they got married.
Didn't get caught. Still married all these years later.
No, which one was the substitute teacher, the mother or the father?
The mother. So it's the same thing. She was slightly, they're like 34, like 4 years apart or whatever, right. 3 years. But the substitute, they've been married all these years because the realities of what you're talking about, that age frame, and a lot of times, if you're substituting, especially if you're needing to substitute, some people do it for supplement, but if you're needing it, you usually don't have a lot of transportation. You do it at local schools that you can do it at. I'm not saying that's everybody's scenario, but so it's probably in the area you're from quite often, unless you move to the city. So it's quite possible there was a formal relationship. Now she didn't go, how long that her and mother knew each other, but they were the exact same scenario and have been married with, I think she said it was 3 or 4 of them children. Ever since, because that's the reality of being 20 and 17. Because if she's not a substitute teacher and there's a 17-year-old boy catches a 20-year-old, nobody frets at that. But it makes sense if you're going to have a charge of, going against authority. You're putting that 20-year-old in I think what I hear you saying is we're putting him in an unrealistic circumstance. And again, she still has to be punished because she's in the position. But we need to rethink what we're doing. And again, I think that's, like you said, the intellectual honesty gives us a chance to move to that discussion versus I definitely see people simply demonizing her. You know what I mean? And I thought of this real quick too. Like even the Puffy Combs and his first whatever, she was 17 when he dated or whatever. And, like 3.5 years apart, a couple years later, he had his first child. That's absolutely normal. You know what I mean? Like that's been normal for a long time. Speaking of being normal, though, as we look at even this idea of what's predatory, for example, historically, doesn't necessarily make it right, but historically, these type of age differences wasn't frowned upon as much as they seem to be today. That's just interesting to me. I don't have necessarily a belief about it. I just know a lot of this was okay to a degree 50 years ago versus today? What are your thoughts about where we've transitioned to?
I totally agree. I mean, I think human nature is human nature. Human nature has not changed, but society has changed. We're evolving, and at the end of the day, everybody has to be responsible and get a partner. And now that the fabric of society has changed, the rules of the game has changed. That doesn't change human nature; it's still there. But people have to practice restraint and have to practice discipline, because we know more information now. We hear people's stories now of how even things that occurred back in the day, we hear stories of how it affected them. We hear stories of power dynamics, the imbalance of power dynamics between two people. And now we know this information. It's like, okay, so that's not exactly the most healthiest thing to do. We don't want someone who isn't thinking totally logically, or someone who doesn't have money, or someone who doesn't have authority, to be put in a situation where they feel pressured to follow the lead of someone simply because they don't have the same power as that other person. So yeah, I totally agree.
No, that makes sense. So yeah, it's just simply the simplest way of putting is we know more now. That's what I'm hearing. That's the simplest way of putting. So like I just looked this up just for this show, for example. So like I think 1950, the average marriage age for a woman was 21, and for a male was like almost 23. So now that's around 26 and 27, or 28 and 20. It keeps going up or whatever. And I just was always curious about it, but that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like now that we're understanding everybody's story, we're trying to say, all right, let's come into this thing more mature. Here's a question that pops in my mind. I just want to get you a quick thought on it. I know you got a family, so I don't want to keep you long, King.
No, you're good.
Okay, cool. So a quick thing that pops in my mind, so we know more now. We're to a degree as a culture, people are waiting a little longer to get married or whatever, which seems to be smarter with what we know now to a degree. Specifically within the African American culture, if you could just pinpoint this for a second, we still to a degree don't seem like we have enough intact families for whatever that means, of figuring it out. So it seems like we because we're not devoid of human nature, we're gonna have sex. Children are going to be made, but it sounds like when people are smart, they make a decision later. They have more informed information. So what are your thoughts about people who are kind of missing out or not considering a smarter way? Like I love the dynamic of how you've, in my opinion, from outside looking in, how you've been very intentional about having your family. I love how you do that. And again, it's not to judge anyone. I just want to kind of hear your thoughts about, trying to move more the culture towards considering being more informed before, in a sense, having a family, if you will, which is something, if that makes sense. I hope I'm making sense here.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think broken families come from broken values, and it comes from, a lack of two-parent household, a lack of economics. We know that when people are not financially secured, and when they don't have a lot of consistent responsibilities, a job to go to, a house payment to pay for, they get horny, they have sex, and they have kids. We know that the more education a person has, the less likely they're able, the later they wait in life to get married, and the later they wait in life to have children, and the less amount of children they have when they get an education. So education slows that down. When people are investing into their future, they're a lot more cautious of the decisions they make. They're cautious of who they have sex with. They're cautious if they're using protection or not. They're cautious of who they marry. The more responsibility you have. So I think education is important, and just having a sense of I'm doing something. I'm investing into my future. When someone doesn't feel like they're investing into their future, they'll have sex with anything, and they'll nut all up in them and everything, and have kids by them, and they're not really thinking. It's very primitive. They're not thinking long term. They're thinking short term. When you think short term, you make reckless decisions. So I think it'll be it'll slowly decline as more people get educated, whether that's formal education or informal, and as more people start businesses and they invest in things and they feel a sense of productivity. I do think families will get stronger from that.
No, I love it, man. Got another brother that wants to jump on. We about close to the end here, so I'm gonna get these thoughts from my man, Big Mike. Big Mike, if you're trying to come on and talk, hit the unmute button. If you don't, I know you just watch. This is just the way you're watching it, so it's not a big problem, brother. But if you want to give me 3 cents on this discussion, because again, I don't want this to be 30 minutes of just me talking. So glad to have Eli jump on because I was going to use your words all night, whether you came on or not. So I'm glad to have have you live in 3D. Big Mike, did you want to jump in, or you just watching, King?
I'm just watching, brother.
All right, no problem. All right, cool. I'll take you off. All right, so yeah, with that said, man, I'm gonna give up my own thing that happened to me in my life. This will be the last thought. Then I always end the show with a piece from my upcoming book. So I'm trying to become an author like yourself, brother.
Hey.
Love your book, Secure the Throne. If you want to shout that out, it's no problem. I thought about this in my own life because I said once I got 18, I did start dating older women, and I loved it. I loved dating women well above my age. That's not all I dated, but my most enjoyment in my life came from dating women, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, my senior throughout my years or whatever. And so of my relationships, those were the ones I appreciated the most. And so before I ever thought about the damage that you talked about and what boundaries are crossed and things of that nature, again, I wasn't the 14-year-old boy or anything like that. You know what I mean? I did lose my virginity at 11 to a 14-year-old, but that's not predatory, if you will, right? But anyway, so by the time I was 18, I'm dating a 25-year-old, and I continued to do that, right? But here's how it played out in my life, just to show you how now that I think about it, I'm forced to think about it because of this discussion. So by the time I'm 35, I'm like, okay, well, eventually I need to have a family, and I can't keep dating older, right? Like that crosses my mind at 35. When I think about it, though, brother, I didn't know how to date younger women. And I struggled with that for 10 years because I really enjoyed the older women. But here's the thing. I spent, like a lot of boys in my younger years, I wasn't thinking about having a relationship. So I wanted to create situations that were comfortable for what I was looking for. And older women, in a sense, here's being honest, they would settle for that situation, obviously easier than a woman my age. And so since I was caught up in what I was focused on and what I was going after, it was easier with the older woman to kind of set up a friends with benefit situation because, I'm the young boy and they wanted it just, to a degree just for that. But I will say, as a boy who enjoyed the chase, I loved catching a woman who had never had a young boy. Like that was my favorite thing to do. She had never done it. You know what I mean? I just enjoyed the mature discussions, but I'm just being honest about it. But here's how it came back to haunt me. By the time I'm 35, to this day, I still struggle with dating younger women. So I don't know if some of what I went through is some of that trauma that I didn't realize as well, but it's just something I thought about tonight. Wanted to bring it to the table just to throw it out there. Give me a thought on that, and I'm gonna close this thing out, King.
Yeah, I totally. I read an article of a similar situation just like that. It was a younger guy. He was 23 years old. He was actually dating a senior citizen woman, and she was like 91.
Oh, God.
So he dated her for 5 years, and she got some sort of mental issue. I think that disease where you forget things.
Amnesia or dementia, maybe?
Yeah, dementia. That's what it was. And so she got put in the nursery home, and he ended up visiting her in the nursery home. He's like in his mid-20s, and he actually got arrested because they walked into her room, and he
It's a bow wow.
It's not funny. It's not funny. It's
Why
not
you
funny.
laughing then? Why you laughing then if it ain't funny?
It's your facial expression. Your facial expression got me.
Oh, now it's my fault. Okay.
They walked in a room and found him having sex with her, and they considered that rape because she had a mind issue. That's very serious. So I was just the way your face looked. So
you're right. My bad.
Anyways, he's still in jail.
Right. Yeah. So it's trauma, unrealized trauma. Even though, like you said, we show up, we're happy about it, we chase the situation. That's our trauma without us realizing it. So at the end of the day, we know more now. It needs to stop, whether it's older men or older women. We definitely need to talk about it because I don't think as much as we disagree with it and simply demonize people, I don't think the dialogue is intellectually honest enough to stop it. For people that disagree with it, we just dismiss it versus let's talk through how to better handle this and let a young man understand how this can be an issue
Right.
getting caught up in that, like to a degree, like I did, even though I was older. So thank you for those thoughts, King.
Absolutely. Hey, appreciate it. Much love. I look forward to getting your book. You have a good one.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. All right. So for everybody listening, man, I always end it with an excerpt from my book. So this piece is, let me read this again, book by the same name, Just My 3 Cents. So look out, pre-sales coming soon. This piece is called Black. This was written back in 2012, by the way. So it's just a bunch of commentaries that I've been putting together. And the idea is for people to read the commentaries and have discussions with people. It's like a discussion book. So you have dialogues with people after you read a piece. So this piece is called Black Socrates Speaks, The Power of Sex. The power of sex. This weekend, I watched a National Geographic program. I rarely watch TV, in which these 2 male lions attacked 4 cheetahs and killed 2 of them on the African plains. This was unusual for 2 reasons. 1, the speed of the cheetahs, and 2, no known history of the 2 big cats being enemies. The lion, while king of the jungle, has always had 2 mortal enemies, hyenas and leopards, both due to their tendency to kill lion cubs. Although when numbers are in their favor, hyenas will attack a full-grown lion as well. In the case of the cheetahs, at first it was misunderstood why these lions were so intent on killing them. However, later in the program, it was discovered that possibly cheetahs kill lion cubs too, which would explain the 2 lions' intent in this instance. This was an interesting discovery, but what was more amazing was why the lions were able to capture and kill the swift-moving cheetahs in the first place. Basically, the 3 male cheetahs were brothers vying for the attention of a female cheetah in heat. She raced across the plains, attempting to escape the male advances, but eventually was captured by them. While the 3 male cheetahs were fighting over mating rights, they didn't notice the mighty lion run up and attack. During the attack, the lion immediately killed the female cheetah. The other 3 initially got away, but in their hormonal rage, they continued to fight one another, attempting to impress what was now a dead female cheetah. Their instinct of fear was completely overcome by their instinct to mate with this female, and they paid no attention when another lion came on the scene for a second attack, killing another cheetah. It was amazing to see how the power of sex made these cheetahs have a total disregard for their own safety. Only after the second attack did the other 2 cheetahs realize the prevailing danger and run away. As for the male lions, it is their natural order to simply kill, not eat, any animal that threatens or could potentially threaten to kill their young. This is why male lions often fight to the death when challenged for their place as the king of their pride. The head lion understands that if he loses a battle to a challenger, the newly crowned lion king will immediately hunt down and kill all the lion cubs in the pride. This is done to ensure only his genes populate the next generation. Inside both gruesome acts, the killing of the sex-craved cheetahs and the killing of lion cubs after the current lion king is dethroned, I see similar correlations to the black male community when it comes to having children. It is supposedly our ability to reason that makes us humans different from the instinctive species of the animal kingdom. However, within the African American community, men and women are acting like they are cheetahs in heat and oblivious to the dangers around them. In the case of humans, it's not lurking lions waiting to attack, but dangers like unwanted pregnancies, abortions, and venereal diseases. This is why 72% of our African American children are born to unwed mothers. Within the natural order of humanity, it was never intended for it to become normal to have children out of wedlock. Have we no shame is the question. For all the men that stand up with the pride of a lion to take care of their kings, married or not, I salute you. I just wish we had more lions than cheetahs. Pun intended. Just my 3 cents. Hashtag healthy marriage before children. I'm gone. Hope y'all enjoyed it. Please share this and subscribe to the YouTube page. Make it make sense. We're out.